see another day, we teachers. Hey! How's everyone? Oh, I feel like a dill doing that sometimes, but hey, it's part of the show, isn't it? I got to get my plugs in now. Hang on 1 second. Hey! Hey! How's everyone tonight? Oh, good. I think I just said that. My name is Chris Quinlan. How are you? Melbourne Musos, Facechook live from the Alex Theatre. Alex rocks! Oh, bit atmospheric tonight. What I want to talk about tonight is actually moving on. Moving on from what I talked about last week, which was the inaugural show for Alex Rocks, Alex Theatre, and everyone. And I thanked a lot of people, and I'm going to thank them again. Susie Cupie Doll, Tim Burnett behind the camera. Hello, mate. How are you? I hope the jokes are going to be a bit better for you tonight, mate. And and everyone at the Alex Theatre. Simon as well. Everybody. Anyway, there you go. And Susie Cupie Doll, mwah, for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful project. What I'm doing tonight is I'm going to move along a little bit with what I was talking about last week. Last week I was talking about being in such a beautiful space such as this, the main foyer of the Alex Theatre, and how we change our sounds and how we do different things. So I was talking about E-rings last week, all sorts of little different bibs and bobs. Even a few weeks ago when I was doing it from the studio, I was talking about when we're feathering a bass drum, you know, when we're doing jazz and all this. This is when I was doing a tribute to Dear Jimmy Cobb, Miles Davis's drummer for the Kind of Blue album, arguably the most important jazz album and all that. Baby socks on your bass drum beaters and all that. Now, what I've done tonight is I'm going to do something different. I've got these ancient mallets in my hand that I've repaired and all sorts of business. They just still keep on going. I have these a long time. There you go. These are older than a lot of my students, actually most of my students. But what I've actually done with the bass drum, I want to just give you a little bit of a sound of this, because this is what I'm going to be working with tonight. Can you hear that? Whoa. Hey, I've taken the stuffing out, you see, and that's what I'm going to do. So that tonight the drums are fairly much wide open. So I'm going to be a little bit on the atmospheric side here. And I want to show you a couple of things, if I may, as far as technique. You might also see that I've changed my tom-toms around. There's the high tom. And there's the mid-tom there. I'll swap them around. So when you're doing the typical you get different flavors, you see. The other thing that I want to show you is down here. I do a little thing here called Splash Hats. And what happens here is that you've got your typical hi-hat. And last week I was talking about heel-toe. A 1, 2, 3, 4. A 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is. There's one there. A bit more force and the hi-hat tambourine comes into play. Heel toe and all that sort of business. But if I just do this, do you see what I'm doing down on boot cam here? Actually, red chippy shoes cam here. I thought I'd sort of try and match the decor. Not successfully. But anyway, what goes on there is I've just got that, right? So. There it is there. see. And one of the things that can happen, I'm always rabbiting on about the hi-hat, aren't I? What goes on is that with the hi-hat, you get so many nuances of sound and stuff. One of the things I was showing one of my students the other day was the idea of playing the bottom hi-hat. You used to see, you still do, Max Roach. I played in Max Roach's Mr. Hi-Hats, and where you're playing the... things like that, you see. And then away you go with that, you see. So there's lots of different things you can do. What am I going to do? And then when you've got this, you're putting air. You're putting a air into the room, you see. You've got that kind of... Now, if I didn't have that and just chick, that's fine. That's cool. But what? Now what I'm doing here, and I'll talk about toms a little bit now, and I'm going to take the snares off and go back to the mallets to try and make it a little bit more on the ambient atmospheric side, because this is perfect for you to do it in. What happens is you get yourself a matching set of cymbals there, and then what can happen is we go down the track of atmospheric kind of, might as well say theatrical, you know. And that's why I've got the bass drum wide open tonight, you see. Different. Now that's a double stroke roll, right? Now, what goes on with a double stroke roll? I was talking a little while ago about torque ratios and all that, like a four-wheel drive, you know, as you go further up, the computer, you know, hugs the, you know, what was that joke I did the other day? It's something to hang on to. But let's not go down that rabbit hole tonight. But what goes on here is I'm going to put it up here a little bit. And you've got a double stroke roll now on these well-worn heads, flogged in fact. And what happens is when you're actually playing, what often happens is when you're playing on a snare drum, that's obviously your most bounciest skin, all that stuff. So you're using a fair amount of finger control, a la Billy Gladstone. You see, you've got that kind of thing. I'm doing it with mallets, but the Gladstone technique and things like that is well used by your metal guys and all that when you're doing blast beats and all that sort of stuff, you know, that kind of thing. And away you go. And what goes on with this is that when you're actually dealing with a snare drum that has bounce, and I've got the snares off with the mallets, there it is there. Now that's just fingers. And as you go through the different camera angles and stuff, you'll see that it has to be called finger control because my wrists aren't moving. Now, when I'm doing that, that's wrist control. That's what happens there. Now, what's this thing about torque ratio? What happens is as you go down the drums, the larger the drum, the less bounce you will have, you know, more floppy, like a trampoline, you know, like that. So what you have to do when you're looking at my wrists now, there's a kind of a blend happening. I'm using the fingers, like so. There's a little bit of a thing there. Bart Simpson, the sound of one hand clapping. That's very Zen joke. Okay, I'll move right along there. But anyway, what goes on? Can't win them all. So what happens is that what I have when I talk about things like this, you've got your wrist control, you've got your finger control, but really most of what we're doing is a blend between the two. I get a little bit suspicious when someone says, I only use molar technique, which is whip stroke, the vip, okay? Like dairy vip, the vipping post. That's Zapper again. I always come back to that joke. Vipping post. When you're whipping, you know. See, I'm whipping, you see. I'm going to get into that in a second, you see. So what happens with that is that when you're dealing with the vip, what happens is that there's a kind of a wrist movement there, the whip stroke, made popularised by Sandford Moeller. That's why it's attributed, the name is attributed. He didn't invent it, he researched it with drummers all the way back to the American Civil War and things like that. And what would happen is that it was attributed to his name, the Moeller technique, because he really made a science of it. I did a show a few years ago called The Science of the Tap, you know, that kind of thing. Should get my lab coat on. But anyway, what happens is you've got that vip, the vipping. You can see I'm pushing down. Now, there's that. And then when you're dealing with Billy Gladstone. Now, for those of you who don't know, Billy Gladstone was the house drummer for New York's Radio City Music Hall for many, many years. So what would happen is you'd hear this. Colgate Toothpaste presents Frank Sinatra. Strangers in the night. Oh, don't do that, Chris. Anyway. But what happens here is that when you're dealing with things like that, there's your Billy Gladstone, okay, because he was, you know, he's like Anton Fig, the very famous South Australian born, but the very famous drummer for the David Letterman show, you know, all that sort of stuff. I used to use his sticks. Man, what logs. How many trees had to die for that drumstick there? I don't know. Anyway, what happens there is that you've got this kind of business, and what you want to be able to try and do, it's very important to think in terms of a volume control. Now, I've got this mallet here. Look how much beaten up this. Oh, darling, I'm glad you're back. There you go. That isn't even felt. You know what that is? That's gauze you wrap around your ankle. I got that from the chemist. $5, mate. Thanks very much. Thank you, mother, for the rabbits. Didn't I do that joke last week, Tim? I did. Sorry about that. I'm yeah, still a tough crowd back there. Anyway, so what happens is that you've got 1 to 10. Think of it like a volume control. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, we have terms that were made in Italy, okay? So what happens is that you can have piano, which means soft, okay? Just soft, okay? Not piano back there, piano here, okay? And then you have moderato, got to roll your R, moderato. And then you have forte, okay? And what really happens if you're dealing with a fader control from 1 to 10, what you would have is piano could be thought of as 3, moderato is 5, and forte would be around about 7. And everything else will have a very attached to it. So piano, the musical term or the abbreviation is just P. But if you have PP, okay, it's very, okay, so it's very soft. If you have FF, okay, what happens? It's very loud, you see, that's what goes on. Then you can have MP, which is mezzo piano, moderately soft. So what we're dealing with is a way of expressing yourself with volume, you see. So what starts to happen is that if I was just to sort of just do the splash hats like I was talking about before, and then just do a roll, I can create something even as simple as that, like a single stroke roll. But I said something as simple as, it's damn hard. Something a bit short and sweet there. Meow. Okay, dramatic. Okay, so what happens is that with this, that was really all about the volume control, you see. So there's that kind of thing, 0 to 10, you see. So that's what happens. There's a few others, of course. You can have a triple P, which is very, very soft, okay? And then you could have SFZ, which is the biggest one. Schwarzando, may the Schwarz be with you. And that means with force, okay? That's what that is. You can also have MF, but that's a whole other subject for another day because I want to keep this PG. So what goes on is working around the drums, not only with dynamics, but actually, you know, like with continuity as well. Molar technique, Billy Gladstone technique, or Gladstone technique as I say, finger control. But now I'm going to show you how to put this around the drums a little bit. When you have accents, and then you want to put those accents around the drums and on the things. I'll go to sticks here for a sec. What happens is you're going to see people like, you know, Buddy Rich and things like that, and they might be putting in all this sort of stuff. Now, how do you get around? There's a thing called a pivot point, okay? Now, what happens is if you're going to play, I'll go back to mallets now, I just wanted to do that very quick. But I'll put them over here. There we go. Now, what happens is that when you're actually doing stuff like this, when you're actually playing between tom-toms, what's going on is, you know, you have that sort of... so, Hail Caesar! Mel Brooks. It's good to be the king. I love that film. What's that? History of the World Part 1. Okay. It's crawling with Romans. I'm sorry about that. Boom tish. Anyway, jokes are still the same. They're guaranteed. So what happens when you're going around? You do not need to go like that. What you can have, I've put myself off a little bit there. You've got that big movement, but what you do is a pivot point. You see? You get that pivot point going, so. You see? Now, the reason for me doing a little bit of the Buddy Rich before is that you actually see him doing pivot points in spades. I've grabbed the wrong stick, but that's all right, I don't mind. Paradiddle diddle is right, left, left, left. There it is there. Now, right, left, left, right, left, right, left, left. Okay? Secret weapon. Okay? Can you see the whip? Okay, there you go. Back to the vipping post. So what goes on with that is there's a pivot point there. Now, once you've got the pivot point going, once you've got the pivot going, all that stuff, you now have things like lead hands and changing lead hands. If you're going down the drums, lead with your right hand. Okay? If you're coming up the drums, left. See, swap the toms, just experiment, that's all fine. And you'll get different kinds of little tones. A lot of drummers do it. All that. I always remember Billy Cobham back in 1990, and he was playing a drum kit that sounded beautiful, but the company didn't last that long. I think it was called Tempest drums. And he had his big 2 bass drums and all that, and he had the typical, you know, 2 tom-toms on each bass drum. So it's huge, okay? But what he did, it was fairly simple. What he actually did was he took tom number 1, rack tom number 1, and just swapped it with rack tom number 4, and went like that. And I had the honour to actually get to know him a little bit. And he actually, dare I say it, really liked the books that I wrote. So there's a bit of an accreditation there with Mr. Cobham. He's a gent. Oh, he's one of my favourite drummers. Mahavishnu Orchestra and all that stuff back in the day. And on Miles, I mentioned Miles Davis before. He's on the Jack Johnson album. Oh, what a shuffle groove that was. Oof. Cool, blimey. Anyway, so what goes on is you swap them. And he had all these different things happening. And what he did was that. Like I was behind there with an old Panasonic MS1. Oh, man, on my shoulder, doing it for the show. And I got it. That's what he's doing. I got it now. So what goes on is that when you're going down the drums, lead with the right hand. When you're coming up the drums, lead with the left. When you want to swap, when you want to change lead hands, you've got two ways to go. This is where Paradiddle is king. You could actually do a double tap on the bottom drum. So you could go Paradiddle, Paradiddle, do you see? And the double tap will change the lead hand. But what you can also do is just use an odd number of strokes, okay? Now, this is where we start to get things like right, left, right, left, right. There's a 5. Then you can have left, right, left. There's another 5. So you get... There you go, you see, you get that kind of... And you sort of, you know, work the love handles there, you know, that kind of thing there. I'm going a bit blue here, Tim. I don't know what's going on. And then what happens here is that you can actually do the Gina Lola Brigida. Gina Lola Brigida, Gina Lola Brigida, you see. So what happens, you know that I'm going to say your name. That kind of thing. Gina. So what goes on here... And that's 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But what happens is when you're starting to do these exercises, you might do a 5, you might do a 7 and all that. But then some of you might be thinking, well, come on, how do you do that in a rock beat? Well, what you do is you edit. You just chop it around. So if I'm going to just play a straight rock beat for a bit. See what I did there? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. There it is there, you see. So what I'm doing is really just the standard fill-ins, really. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. But what I'm doing is I'm subdividing the bar. So you've got 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1. And then you just adjust the exercises to suit. You don't have to overthink it. You don't want any kind of analysis paralysis or anything like that. What you actually want to try and get going is just a smooth flow so that when you're playing around, what can happen here, you now have a combination of pivots and then lead hands, right? Get it? Got it? Good. Danny Kaye, 1955, The Court Jester. Pellet with the poisons in the vessel with the pestle. The flagon with the dragon has the blue brew that is true. That's not my joke though, so don't blame me. The delivery was my fault, but anyway. There's the pivots, you see. So next time you're seeing some of the incredible drummers like Buddy Rich, Jeannie Krupa, some of the jazz greats, you've got having a look at John Bonham, I've mentioned Billy Cobham. What starts to happen is that you want to get a smooth flow, and what happens is with this, I mentioned Paradiddle before. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. This is where these kind of rudiments reign supreme. A reign supreme. A reign supreme. John Coltrane, 1964 with Elvin Jones. Anyway, what happens then? Where did that come from? I didn't script that. I actually don't script anything. Anyway, that's what... But what goes on with this... Dynamics, piano, bit forte, moderato. Now, back to hi-hat again. Not quite so drunk this week. Still fairly drunk. Come on, hi-hat. What can happen if you work it just the right way, and if we go down to the old Big W shoe cam on special, what happens is that you can get a little bit of a chick on the way up. So you go chicka, 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 right? Can you hear it? If I get it right. Now, some people will not like that at all, but you've got to go with what you got. That's Alan Zavod. Dear Alan, sometimes, Chris, you just got to go with what you got. That's all I've got. So there's a... And that's what we got. Now, what I wanted to do now, just to start to wrap it up, I'm not sure how many minutes left I've got, but I've got 3 minutes. Tim, thank you so much. 3 minutes. What happens? One of the things that happens with drums is that the common thing is when you hit a crash cymbal, you have to hit the bass drum as well. Like that. And what happens also is that because I'm atmospheric, when you do not hit a crash cymbal with a bass drum or a snare drum or whatever it might be, you have what is known as I've called it an empty sound, right? There it is. It usually needs something like a big bass drum like this, you know, wide open. And this takes me to starting to wrap the show up. I'll start to get towards the end there. I might go a little bit over, but we'll see how we go. What happens is that's empty space. And what's happening now is that Channel 31, thanks to the government and the decision, we're fighting like red-headed bastards to try and keep an Australian community TV channel from turning into empty space, because I can't even start to tell you what community television has done for Melbourne, you know, that kind of thing. The time that I've been with Channel 31 since the beginning, pretty much, and the camaraderie and the history, and it, like I said to dear Sue Headley, who was the original producer of Asylum. How many of you guys in there, guys and gals, have been in a band that's had a crack on Asylum? Okay, or the Hard Rock Show, and Guitar Gods, all these different shows. Not to mention everything else. It's about to be turned off. We have to fight this and stop it from becoming empty space. And what goes on is, I hope I haven't, but I may have put my last show that I made specifically for Channel 31. The last one may have been on Wednesday night. And I don't want it to be, because I've made another one and I've sent it off. But the thing is, I don't know if it's going to be aired. I'm going to keep going. I mean, this is, look. It's beautiful, incredible. The innovations that Susie Cupidole, Tim and Simon Barnett, and everyone at the Alex Theatre, it's incredible. The camaraderie is brilliant. And what I did at the end, that's my editorial. And what I've done tonight, and last week as well, is try to sort of talk about how you can create independence, dynamics, ambience. Don't be afraid to take the stopping out of the bass drum and make it sound like Bonham's 26 one. Woof, you know. Or the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra's bass drum. Oh, they've got a bass drum there that does woofka. But this is what I did. This is the last thing that I did for the show on Wednesday night. One of the things I try and do is get people to breathe evenly when you're actually playing. So you get something on automatic and you can keep on going. This is what I did the other night. This is by Dylan Thomas. Do not go gently into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The wise men at their end know dark is right. Because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learn, too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage! Rage against the dying of the light! Thank you. I'm out of here. Let's try and save community TV. One last ditch effort. Take care. My name's Chris Quinlan, Melbourne Musos, Susie Cupidole, Tim Barnett, Simon Barnett, Alan Randell, everybody at Alex Theatre. I love you all. Here we go. Take care. Oh! Hey! Rage! Rage against the dying of the light. Did we win?